Alright, what's going on guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Chandra Bold Pyromancer Planeswalker Deck. As always, do keep in mind that these are not intended to be tier 1 competitive decks. If you want that, consider checking out the latest tournament results. What we'll be doing is upgrading this deck card by card, sticking to this deck's themes, and doing it on a budget, as we will not exceed this deck's original MSRP price with our upgrades. Also, since Kaladesh and Amonkhet will be rotating out of Standard soon, I am not going to include cards from those sets in my upgrades. We'll only be using Ixalan through Core Set 2019, so you can continue using this deck after Standard rotates. So, let's get started. So, how does the Chandra Bold Pyromancer Planeswalker deck work? Well, it's a green-red mana ramp beatdown deck with a focus on casting spells with kicker abilities. So cards like Llanowar Elves, Elfame Druid, and Marwyn the Nurturer all ramp us into more mana, so we can have plenty of it at our disposal to cast large spells as quickly as possible. So, after we ramp with the elves, the deck hopes to cast things like Baloth Gorger, Grunn the Lonely King, and Fight with Fire. All of these are pretty so-so, but become massive powerhouses if we can get enough mana to pay for their kicker costs. Grunn can win the game by himself just by becoming a 10-10 that then becomes a 20-20 on attacking, provided you pay the kicker cost, and Fight with Fire can deal a whopping 10 damage divided any way you choose. The problem, of course, is that these spells are incredibly expensive, hence the mana ramping. The unique cards that come with a deck, the cards you can only get by purchasing it, are Chandra herself, along with Karplusion Hound and Chandra's Outburst. Chandra is pretty on point with the deck, providing us with even more mana and a pretty crazy ultimate, but Karplusion Hound doesn't do much for us, and Chandra's Outburst is really expensive for what it does. But anyway, the deck has plenty of really bad cards for us to upgrade. Cards like Pyromantic Pilgrim, Fire Elemental, and Primordial Worm. I mean, the Pyromantic Pilgrim is strictly worse than On-Crop Crasher, which even without its Exert ability has an extra point of toughness, so literally it's just all upside, it's bigger for the same cost. So yeah, why play the Pyromantic Pilgrim? Fire Elemental compares pretty poorly to Glorybringer, and Primordial Worm is pretty much worse than everything, especially Carnage Tyrant. Same power, same toughness, same casting cost, but all upside with the Carnage Tyrant. So yeah, it's pretty bad. Alright, so let's get into our upgrades, and remember, we are doing this on a budget, and we are sticking to the kicker theme. So first off, we're going to take out 3 Fire Elementals, and we'll replace them with 3 Territorial Allosaurus. So, even ignoring the Dinosaur's text box, even if that didn't exist, it costs 1 mana less, and yet it has an extra point of toughness. A 5 mana 5/4, or a 4 mana 5/5. Yep, it's just plain strictly better. It also has the added benefit of being able to blow up a creature if you have an extra 3 mana to kick it. Because if you can pay the kicker cost, it comes into play and fights a creature, so you can kill pretty much anything that's smaller than a 5/5. That raises the cost to 7, and 7 is a lot of mana, but if you're playing Fire Elemental, again, this is strictly better without the kicker, and the kicker is just a nice bonus. Next, we'll take out Gaia's Protector for another Allosaurus. I don't know, the Protector is interesting. I mean, it could, in a, very specific scenario, result in like a game-ending attack. But I feel like the Allosaurus is going to be more consistent more often. The Allosaurus could also just blow up a blocker for the win. So, I don't know, the Allosaurus, it's a whole lot better. Also, did anyone notice the poor little fungus guy watching his friend being eaten alive in the bottom corner of the art? It's horrifying. Next up, we're going to take out 2 Baloth Gorgers for 2 Varix Blade Wings. Admittedly, this is a somewhat expensive upgrade, as the Varixes are a couple dollars each in USD, but this pretty much comprises most of the money we're spending on this build, and I think it's well worth it. So comparing these side by side, the Baloth Gorger is a 4 mana 4/4, and Varix is a 4 mana 4/4 with flying. Yep, once again, it's strictly better. The kicker is also 1 mana cheaper on the dragon and results in 1 additional power on the battlefield, and all of it has evasion as all of that power is in the air. The Baloth becomes a 7/7 if it's kicked, which can be chump blocked forever, and Varix summons another 4/4 legendary dragon, giving us 8 power flying. So Varix is strictly better. It's cheaper to kick, and it puts out more power with evasion if you pay that extra mana. So yeah, that seems better to me. Next up, we're going to take out the Primordial Worm for another Varix. Primordial Worm is just not good. I mean, look, if you're a new player, there's a chance you think Primordial Worm is a great card just because it's, really big. And I get that. I'm not judging. When I was new, I thought Scaled Worm was the best creature in the game. Well, technically I thought Thorn Elemental was the best creature in the game, along with Scaled Worm. And Scaled Worm is an 8 mana 7/6 as opposed to a 6 mana 7/6. So yeah, it's just, here's the issue. Half the time, you won't be able to cast the worm. And when you do, there's a good chance it'll just be hit with a removal spell instantly. It doesn't have evasion, it doesn't have trample, so it's just really clunky. I think that's the issue. I'm not saying it's not big, I'm not saying it's not powerful, I'm just saying it's clunky, awkward, and it doesn't have the impact that you would think. Whereas the flyers, Varix, will literally end the game if they go unanswered for a couple turns. And your opponent has to deal with 2 of them, so they will win more games more often than the worm. I promise. Next up, we're going to replace the Pyromantic Pilgrims with Untamed Kavu. Untamed Kavu is pretty boring if it isn't kicked. A 2 mana 2/2 with Vigilance and Trample is, trample on a 2/2, not that exciting. But for just 5 mana, we get a 5/5 with Vigilance and Trample. So that's pretty decent, especially if we ramp into it on turn 3 or 4 with our mana elves. Pyromantic Pilgrim, on the other hand, it's just, it's not that great. It's worse than On-Crop Crasher, and it's just not particularly exciting. I mean, 3 mana, 3/1 with haste is, The Kavu, on the other hand, could potentially, just end the game by being a 5/5 with Vigilance and Trample. Remember, Vigilance, so it's going to be untapped for blocking as well. And if you can get it out on turn 3 or 4 as well, pretty crazy. So, with all of these expensive beasties, we need to get to work on our mana ramping. So let's replace 2 Carplusion Hounds with 2 Llanowar Elves. Llanowar Elves is one of the most classic and iconic mana dorks in history. And while it has been outclassed by Noble Hierarch and whatnot in Modern, it's still a fantastic card to play in Standard. This allows us to fuel out a turn 3 Territorial Allosaurus or Varix Bladewing, both of which could give our opponent a lot of trouble if they get out that early. The Carplusion Hound, on the other hand, it's just kind of slow. I mean, granted, if we get it out with Chandra in play, being able to shock something every time it attacks is, it kind of sounds fun. Like, that sounds like a fun thing to do. But most of the time, it's going to be a slow, clunky 3/3 that doesn't really do anything. Mana ramp is what we're doing, and Llanowar Elves will do it for us. Next, we'll also take out the final Carplusion Hound and replace it with an extra Elfame Druid. This is less good than Llanowar Elves. It costs an extra mana and it has no attack power, so we can't ever deal damage to the opponent with it. But it does produce 2 mana for kicker spells, and since that's what we're doing, that does it ramps us into a lot of mana very quick. I mean, if we can get this and a Llanowar Elf on turns 1 and 2, we'll already have 5 mana on turn 3 for, say, an Untamed Kavu, which would be a turn 3 5/5 with Vigilance and Trample. So that wouldn't be the worst. Next, we'll take out the Corrosion Druid and replace it with another copy of Marwyn the Nurturer. The Druid is kind of awkward. Without being kicked, it's a 3 mana 2/3, which isn't terribly impressive. And while gaining 10 life is definitely pretty extreme, it ultimately leaves us with a boring 2/3 on the battlefield that probably isn't going to do a whole lot, and it costs a lot of mana to do that. I mean, if we're going to spend that much mana, we could do like big, powerful things. Putting a 2/3 on the battlefield and gaining 10 life, I mean, With that much power and with that much mana, we would be better off just, killing our opponent instead of stalling. But in this case, we're going to replace it with Morrowind because we need more mana ramp. Morrowind helps us fuel out these expensive kicker spells, and it is possible for her to become a powerhouse herself if she's left unchecked for too long, so seems worth it to me. Next, we're going to take out a land for another Morrowind. These Planeswalker decks always seem to have way too many lands, and we have so many mana elves that honestly we could probably go down a couple more. I don't want to take out too many though, because not drawing enough mana is never fun, so we'll just take out one for another Morrowind for now. Adventurous Impulses would help in this regard as well. Anyway, next we're going to work on the spells in the deck. We're going to take out a Pierce the Sky for a Lightning Strike. Now, Pierce the Sky is absolutely devastating against flyers, though the obvious drawback is it's a dead card against decks that don't run flyers. So Lightning Strike is one of the best red spells in Standard right now. It kills creatures and you can bolt your opponent's face to potentially win the game, so it's going to be a million times more useful than Pierce the Sky. Next up, we'll take out a Fiery Intervention for another Lightning Strike. Fiery Intervention might seem more powerful because it deals more damage and it does multiple things, but 5 mana is a lot for what it does, and if you really care about destroying artifacts, then Abrade would be a better choice. Abrade is an Amonkhet, however, so we won't be using it in this rotation-proof build. Lightning Strikes it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, Lightning Bolts would be nice, but those aren't standard legal, so Lightning Strikes, we'll do that. Finally, we're going to take out 2 Shivan Fires for our final 2 copies of Lightning Strike. The problem with Shivan Fire is it can only hit creatures. And yes, while we can cast it for 5 mana to deal an extra point of damage over the lightning strikes, the extra 1 damage isn't worth it considering it can't target opponents. I've been playing this game for a very long time, and I can't tell you how many times I've targeted my opponent with a burn spell to win the game. We really want the lightning strikes as creature removal, that's the primary plan with those, but having the ability to just fling it at your opponent's face will definitely win you games. Just don't do it unless it kills your opponent. Always, always, always hold it for removing creatures, and then if your opponent falls below 3 life, then fire off the lightning strike to kill your opponent. Otherwise, you want this as a creature removal spell. So yeah, there you go guys. That's it. That's the deck. If you have some extra cash, you can upgrade this deck further with things like, actually, no. Hang on. If you're gonna spend money, don't spend it upgrading a green-red mana ramp kicker deck. If you're gonna spend more money, you should push yourself towards the mono-green Stompy build, which is to say, drop the kicker theme and remove the color red altogether. Then you can go with things like Steel Leaf Champion, Goreclaw, Gigantosaurus, maybe Gota, and so on. There's a lot of really big green things right now. Like Wizards of the Coast is really pushing mono green Stompy. If you can go like turn 1 Llanowar Elves and a turn 2 Steel Leaf Champion, I mean it's a turn 2 5/4. So yeah, mono green pretty good right now. That's what you'd want to push yourself towards, not spending a ton of money on a green-red mana ramp build. So yeah, that's what you'd want to push yourself towards. You could also upgrade the mana base with Rootbound Crag, which is also pricey, but lands that come into play tapped are basically the worst, so Rootbound Crag will make things a lot more consistent in that regard. Anyway, that's it guys. That's the deck. Our total cost is running at about $12 at the time of this recording, and over $7 of that is in the Varix Blade Wings alone. So if you don't want to buy those, then I guess you could reduce the cost to just a few bucks, but I do believe those are significantly more powerful than the Baloth Gorgers. But anyway, that's the deck. While you won't be winning a GP with this thing, if you've been playing it straight out of the box, then this should be significantly more powerful. And it should definitely give you a better chance at beating your friends. It's a, much more powerful deck for very little cost. Anyway guys, if you decide to go with these upgrades, let me know how it went in the comments. And in the meantime, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.